Imagine being trapped underground, buried beneath thousands of tons of rock, with no way of knowing if help is coming. No sunlight, no fresh air, no food, just the crushing weight of silence and the fear that this right here might be your grave. For two miners, Todd Russell and Brant Webb, this nightmare became a horrifying reality. This is the insane true story of how they survived 14 grueling days underground, battling hunger, thirst, and complete isolation before finally being pulled from the depths in what became one of the most unbelievable rescues in history. How did they manage to stay alive for so long? And how did rescuers pull off what seemed like an impossible operation? Let's dive into their extraordinary story. The date was April 25th, 2006, and it started like any normal workday at the Beaconsfield Gold Mine in Tasmania, Australia. Todd Russell and Brant Webb, two experienced miners, were deep underground, about 925 meters or over half a mile below the surface. Alongside them were 14 other workers, all focused on their daily mining operations. Todd Russell was a miner for the past 25 years, whereas Brant Webb had been a miner from the past 9 years before this incident. Then, disaster struck. At 9:26 p.m., the earth suddenly shook violently. It felt like an earthquake had hit. The sound of grinding rock filled the air, followed by an ear-splitting explosion. Before anyone had time to react, the mine collapsed. A massive cave-in had just occurred, sending an avalanche of rock crashing down. When the dust settled, one miner was dead, several had narrowly escaped, and two men, Todd Russell and Brant Webb, were completely trapped inside a tiny cage of twisted metal and rubble. It was a death trap. When Todd and Brant regained their senses, they realized they were in complete darkness. Their mining cage had been crushed by falling debris, but somehow a small air pocket had formed around them. They were trapped in a space barely big enough to move on a Y about 1.2 meters high and 4 meters long. They had no way of knowing whether the other miners had escaped or if they were the only ones left alive. With their helmets dimly lighting the space, they quickly checked their supplies. It wasn't good food or water, and worst of all, no idea if help was coming. For the first few hours, the two men remained hopeful. Rescue crews had to be looking for them, right? But as the hours turned into days, their hope began to fade. Would anyone even find them before it was too late? By the second day, Todd and Brant were already starving. Their stomachs ached from hunger, but they had nothing to eat. Then came the dehydration. Their lips cracked, and their mouths felt like sandpaper. Desperation kicked in. In a moment of sheer survival instinct, the two men licked water from the mine walls, just enough moisture to keep their bodies functioning. Days passed, and the isolation took a toll. Trapped in complete darkness, they had no sense of time. The silence was deafening, and their minds played tricks on them. They started talking about what food they would eat when they got out. But the more they talked, the hungrier they became. They even discussed eating the leather from their work boots, a survival tactic that has saved people in extreme situations. But they decided against it. Instead, they kept their minds occupied, trying to stay sane. They sang songs, told jokes, and even played mental games to keep their spirits up. And it worked. Against all odds, they managed to stay mentally strong. But still, help was nowhere in sight. Their families outside were mentally tortured, thinking that they were dead. After hearing the news of the death of their colleague, the families lost hope. But their hopes returned after finding out they were both alive. Above ground, the search for survivors was underway. Rescuers had no idea if anyone was still alive in the collapsed section of the mine. And with the debris so unstable, they had to proceed carefully. Then after 5 long days, the first breakthrough happened. Rescue teams sent a microphone and camera down into the rubble, and they heard something shocking, a faint tapping sound. Todd and Brant were alive. The moment rescue teams realized they had survivors, the operation changed completely. Now, it wasn't about recovery, it was about getting them out alive. At this point, the world was watching. News of the trapped miners had spread across Australia and beyond. Rescuers now had one goal: dig a tunnel and pull them out. But there was a problem. The mine was unstable, and even the smallest mistake could trigger another collapse, crushing Todd and Brant instantly. To avoid that, they had to dig a special escape tunnel, but it would take days. During that time, they managed to send food and water to Todd and Brant through a small pipe. For the first time in a week, the men had something to eat. They were weak, exhausted, and barely holding on, but now they had hope. After 2 weeks of non-stop drilling, the rescue team finally broke through the rock wall. A tunnel had been completed, and on May 9, 2006, after spending 14 grueling days underground, Todd Russell and Brant Webb crawled out of the mine and into the arms of their rescuers. The crowd above erupted into cheers. After spending over 300 hours buried alive, they were finally free. Todd and Brant became national heroes. Their story was one of unbelievable survival, mental strength, and determination to stay alive. They were interviewed by reporters, celebrated by their community, and even received financial compensation for their ordeal. But the experience left its mark. Both men struggled with psychological trauma. The darkness, the hunger, and the fear of never being found, it stayed with them long after they escaped. Todd Russell suffered from PTSD after the incident. He could not even bear being in confined spaces, which make it impossible for him to return to the mining job again. Brant, on the other hand, had severe physical problems like weakness, joint pains, and cramps. He started drinking alcohol to cope with the trauma. Both the miners suffered emotionally due to the incident. The Beaconsfield mine disaster also sparked major safety reforms in Australian mining. Companies invested more in emergency rescue planning, ensuring that if something like this ever happened again, miners would have a better chance of survival. Todd Russell and Brant Webb's story is one of the most incredible survival tales in history. For 14 days, they faced starvation, dehydration, total darkness, and the fear of being forgotten. But through mental resilience, determination, and an incredible rescue operation, they made it out alive. Now imagine yourself in their situation. Could you survive 14 days underground with no food, no water, and no way out? And there you have it, another wild survival story that proves humans are basically part cockroach. We just refuse to go down. But what do you think? Which part of this story blew your mind the most? Or do you have an even crazier survival story we should cover? Drop it in the comments. I read them all, even the weird ones. Now, if you enjoyed this and want more insane, real-life survival tales, smash that subscribe button like it's your last can of food in the apocalypse, and don't forget to hit the bell icon because we've got new survival stories dropping every single week. Remember, survival isn't just a skill, it's a mindset. And watching this channel totally counts as training. Stay safe, stay smart, and I'll see you in the next one.